All right, guys, now we're going to learn a little bit more vocabulary. So we want to learn about something that we call the main verb. The main verb of a sentence is the verb inside of the independent clause, always, all right? So in any general sentence, there will always be at least one independent clause, right? You have to have an independent clause in order to have a sentence, so we've already addressed that. Sometimes you'll also have a dependent clause, and the dependent clause will always just be additional information on top of that independent clause. So the independent clause is the really big, crucial information in the sentence, and therefore, we want to consider that sort of the main part, right? So the verb inside of that clause is the main verb. This is important because, as you can see here, there is a dependent clause and an independent clause in this sentence. And there are two verbs, okay, was and went. There are two verbs here. There are two subjects. There's I and I. They happen to be the same. But there are two subjects, two verbs. So we got to figure out which one is the main verb. And we're going to do a bit of practice. So read the sentence. When I was 7, I went to the zoo. And think about which one is the independent clause, and therefore which one has the main verb. Ready, set, go. And it is went. All right, cool. So when I was 7 is the dependent information, dependent clause. Was is not the main verb. Went is the main verb. Let's do another one. Before we arrive, I will call Joe. We want to find the main verb. Which one is it? It's this one. So before we arrive, right, before is one of those words that triggers us. We know, okay, all right, that's a dependent. So before we arrive, there's a verb over here, arrive, but that's not the main verb. I will call Joe is our independent clause, and therefore will call is our main verb. All right. Now I'm going to mix it up on you guys, make it a little bit tricky. What do we think about this one? I will call Joe before we arrive. Give it a thought. And it still will call, right? Before we arrive, it doesn't matter if the dependent clause comes at the beginning or the end of the sentence. So don't think about this positionally, right? It's not about position. It's not about formulaicness, all right? Don't make it like that. We just have to find the independent clause. And I will call Joe is still independent. Before we arrive is still dependent. So the verb inside the independent clause is our main verb. All right, I will be late because traffic is terrible today. What do we think the main verb is? Think about it in your heads. And it's will be. So traffic is terrible today. That's part of the dependent clause, right? Because traffic is terrible today. It's dependent because it starts with that word because. So is not our main verb. Will be is our main verb. Because I will be late is our independent clause. So take this idea with you and let's attack the next couple of questions.